Be the envy of the neighborhood. 860 KKAT, where the grass is always greener. Welcome to Gardening Utah. Here's composter and show hoster, Jenna Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. I am your host, Jenna Francis. Every week here on Gardening Utah, we give you gardening inspiration and advice from experts across the state. We talk about all things vegetables, flowers, trees, shrubs, and of course, your lawn. We make sure that you stay in the know of all the tasks that you need to accomplish every week in your garden and yard. Thank you for listening. We hope this show is something that you will look forward to every week. Episodes drop every weekend on Apple Podcasts, so make sure to subscribe there because you'll never miss an episode. We also air on the radio in Utah on KKAT 860 AM on Saturday and Sunday at 10 a.m. We aim to inform and inspire you as you work in the yard or while you're out and about shopping at nurseries and garden centers. And if you look up our show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can kind of binge our show. You know, this is episode 8 now, and you can listen to past episodes and listen to experts that we've had in as guests. And we've had some really fun conversations about all different kinds of topics. So definitely, if you're just now listening to episode 8 for the first time, thank you for listening. And you can go back on a podcasting app and listen to all of our other episodes. And so we'd love to get your feedback as well on Gardening Utah Instagram. So if you just look us up on Instagram, we are at Gardening Utah. And this is where I talk to a lot of our listeners. I'm getting some really, really fun feedback from people. And what I really like to do is if you've got someone who you think should be a sponsor of the show or a guest on the show, or I really love to shout out local events. So if you've got a garden related event coming up, I know I talk a lot about what's going on at Thanksgiving Point or Red Butte Gardens or any place like that. Please give us a message because I'd love to give your event a shout out and let the Gardening Utah listener know all about it. So on today's episode, I'm really excited for this episode. It is jam-packed, and I know I always say that, but I'm serious. We are going to talk about, right now there's the big debate. When do you put in your garden? And of course, history says wait till Mother's Day. And we're going to get into that a little bit. And we also have a guest that I have wanted on this show from day one. We have Brian Lloyd from Olson's Greenhouse, and you'll learn all about what Olson's Greenhouse is and all about that business because it's very likely if you have bought plants at Home Depot or Walmart or a lot of other stores like that, you very well have plants from Olson's Greenhouse in your yard. And we're going to talk to Brian and learn all about where they sell their plants and just it's fascinating conversation. So I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. So there's a lot this week. So I want you to sit back, watch the spring buds unfurl, enjoy those hummingbirds in the garden, and let's get into the dirt. But first, the tip of the week.
860 KKAT with your Gardening Utah tip of the week.
My tip of the week is how to properly feed the hummingbirds in your garden. Now, I seem to remember when I was a kid that the hummingbirds would come out sometime around Memorial Day and leave around Labor Day, but I feel like that's very different. And one of the good tips that I've heard is either try to put out a hummingbird feeder about a week before you expect hummingbirds in your yard. But I actually saw a hummingbird this week in my garden. So I'm always very excited when we see the first hummingbirds, and so immediately want to get the feed out. So here's the proper way to feed hummingbirds. First of all, the fact that a lot of the things you would find in the stores have the red liquid. That is not necessary for hummingbirds, and in fact is not ideal because of the food coloring that's inside that solution. So the best and the least expensive solution for your hummingbird feeder is a 1 to 4 solution of refined white sugar to tap water. So that's a 1/4 cup sugar to 1 cup of water. And I like to make it in bigger batches. So I typically will do maybe 3 cups of water and 3/4 cup of sugar. So you bring that solution to a boil and then you let it completely cool. And then, of course, before you fill your hummingbird feeder, you're going to want to make sure that it's completely clean. I like to clean mine with vinegar and shake it out really good and let it dry in the sun so it's free of any kind of bacteria and that sort of thing. And then you fill up your hummingbird feeder once it cools down and get it out there for the birds. Now, just remember that if you are refrigerating any extra solution, to bring it up to room temperature before you refill your hummingbird feeders. So again, the red coloring that you see in the stores is not necessary, so don't add any red food coloring to the liquid. The reddening chemicals can prove harmful to the birds, and nectar itself is a clear solution. So, yes, hummingbirds are attracted to red coloring, but the reality is the hummingbird feeders are already red on the base, so you're good to go there. And it's good to have a hummingbird feeder out in your yard because it's a supplemental source of nectar for your local hummingbirds, and it can help them through times when there aren't as many blooming flowers available nearby. So just remember, though, it is a commitment. So once you get it out there, if they're starting to get used to it, you're really going to want to make sure that you stay committed, keep it clean, and keep the insects out of it. And so in hot weather, the feeder should be emptied and cleaned at least twice a week. And in cooler weather, once a week is probably fine. So I typically do that every Saturday. And if your hummingbirds empty the feeder with greater frequency, then make sure that you clean it every time it's empty. That's very important because think about it, it's outdoors and it's getting, sun on it. So cleaning it with hot tap water works fine, or again, like I mentioned, a weak vinegar solution, and try to avoid dish soaps because that can leave residue in the feeder. Now, in most areas of North America, hummingbirds tend to leave during the winter, so it's best to put the feeder out about a week before they normally arrive in your yard. Now, here's a few plants really quickly that hummingbirds are attracted to if you want to bring more of them to your yard. They love bee balm, they love fuchsia and lantana, hollyhocks, rose of Sharon, butterfly bush, trumpet vine, and honeysuckle. So just make sure when you put your hummingbird feeders out in your garden to put them 6 feet apart, because hummingbirds get very territorial, and there's nothing like watching one hummingbird dive bombing another hummingbird at a feeder because they think that is their territory. It's quite entertaining. So make sure that you put your hummingbird feeders about 6 feet apart. And that was the tip of the week.
Never miss a tip for your garden, and never miss an episode. The Gardening Utah Podcast with Jana Francis at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
I love bird watching. That's something you learn about me. I could spend so long sitting out and, with a little cup of coffee and watching the birds and the butterflies and the hummingbirds do their thing. It's fascinating. So after the break, we are going to be talking with Brian Olson of Olson's Greenhouse. I'm so excited to have him as my guest on Gardening Utah this week. I'm excited for you to hear his story. We're going to learn all about where Olson's Greenhouse is in Utah. We're going to dispel some myths about buying local, and we're going to talk about how you can get some of his incredibly grown bedding plants in your yard immediately. So stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden. Here's Jana Francis.
Welcome to Gardening Utah. Thank you for listening. With me in our virtual studio here is Brian Lloyd with Olson's Greenhouse. Brian, thanks for joining me.
It is so great to be with you, Jana. Thanks for having us.
I am so excited to have you here. I've wanted you to be a guest on Gardening Utah this is our 8th episode, so I've wanted to have you on ever since I started, so I'm really happy that you took the time to be with us today.
And you've got such a great show. We're so proud that you invited us on, and I'd love to tell our story because it's a great family business story, and we've got a lot I'd love to share with your listeners, so thanks for having us.
I can't wait. Absolutely, and I've been really fascinated with your story in particular because as listeners of Gardening Utah know, I really love to deep dive into the initial, the beginnings of the businesses. And I love, being in the positions and the career that I've always had is just, really supporting businesses. And beyond gardening that we all know and love, I really love to get the history and the passion behind it. And one of the fascinating things with Olson's Greenhouse that I've learned from you is that it is such a family business with so much history. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so I am, first of all, to get into the family business, my last name is Lloyd, as you mentioned. And so I had to marry in because I'm such an integral part of the business now. It's like I'm a blood child.
So it's the wife's family. Okay, I got it.
So I'm Brian Lloyd. My wife was an Olson, and me and my brothers-in-law and sisters-in-law that work in the family business are all the fourth generation right now. So it was my great-grandfather-in-law that started the company in 1942, just in his backyard as a hobby. And he would grow pansies and things like that. They would actually, it was really cool. They would go and harvest some soil from the local foothills in the mountains around Santaquin, Utah, and they'd bring that good earth into their beds, and then they'd put it on top of pea silage. And as the pea silage would break down, it would provide heat to the roots. And so that's how they'd get an early crop of pansies out, is by heating the roots with decomposing pea silage from local farmers. And they would start tomato starts that way and sell them back to local farmers. And then they started growing ornamentals like pansies and petunias and things like that. So it was a really cool beginning, really humble roots, and done as a side job, a little side hustle for my great-grandfather-in-law, Roy Olson, and all of his kids would work in the business, going out and weeding and picking flowers and pulling orders and things like that. And it went from there to where my grandfather-in-law, Jack Olson, and his wife, Nola Ray, they really built the business into something special. And they were selling to independent garden centers throughout the state and into Colorado and neighboring states. And that's where things really started to get going. And then my father-in-law, Bart Olson, and his wife, Yvonne, worked with his two brothers, Brad Olson and Donnie Olson, and they really built the business into something that sells to retailers throughout those states. So like Kmart was one of their first accounts, and Pay and Pack, and some of the other big box stores that were also into selling flowers, as well as grocery stores and anybody who would retail flowers we would sell to.
Oh, I love that. Pay and Pack, that is a blast from the past right there.
Yeah, if they've sold flowers, we've probably sold it to them. So all the independent garden centers located throughout the state and neighboring states, as well as Albertsons and Smith's Food King and the grocery stores. And then, Ernst Garden Center, or Ernst Home Center, for those that remember them, and Eagle Hardware. Sure back in the 80s and 90s, and Kmart was always a great account for us. Everywhere that sold flowers, we've been growing since the 40s, so we've tried to sell to all of them. Fred Meyer's, all those places.
Well, and it's like I said in the first segment of this show, if you have bought annual plants in Utah, you very likely have something from Olson's Greenhouse in your yard.
Yeah, we do grow a lot of flowers. I haven't counted it up yet. But I tried to roughly estimate. I think we probably do in the tens of millions of seedlings every year.
Tens of millions.
Yes.
That's unbelievable.
So
how many actual greenhouses are there?
Well, that's kind of a tough question because the greenhouses come in all shapes and sizes, and we have different styles of greenhouses depending on what we're doing and what we're growing. So what we like to do is call it square footage under cover. And we do grow some stuff outdoors, and we have some outdoor growing areas, but it's mainly grown in a greenhouse. And so under cover, we have all told in our growing operations in Colorado, Utah, and Idaho, we have just a few million square feet.
A few million square feet. That's just something that's unimaginable to me.
Right. It's so beautiful. I mean, it's such a wonder to walk around and see all the different crops we can grow and get into. And we sell to a lot of different retail locations, over 400 locations to the customers that we sell to. Currently, we sell to Home Depot, Walmart, Costco, and Sam's Club mostly. A little bit every once in a while to some others. But those are our main customers right now. But the bigger thing that I'm most proud of is we sell from El Paso, Texas to Havre, Montana. So from the Mexican border to the Canadian border, we sell west to Reno, Nevada, and east to Omaha, Nebraska, actually Council Bluffs, Iowa. And so we have a large footprint and we have a lot of different zones that we sell to. And so we get to interact with gardeners from all different walks of life, all different climates. And we love doing that part of it.
That is truly unbelievable. And that's just mind-boggling to me. I mean, I'm starting to think through, okay, wait, how do you get the plants all? I mean, it's just amazing.
And that's that's kind of a unique thing about our industry is it started out as really fragmented, a lot of different suppliers selling to this mass market, these big box retailers, because you can't ship plants very far. The longest you can really ship a bedding plant is maybe 2 nights, but we prefer to just have it go overnight if we even have to go overnight. So we'd prefer not to ship more than 10 or 12 hours away from our location, our growing locations. And because of that, we have those different growing operations in different states that get us closer to our market. But it's tough to ship a bedding plant. You couldn't ship from Utah to the East Coast. There's no way. The flowers just don't do well in those types of conditions and that darkness that you get. And so there's a lot of greenhouses that do sell into the mass market, but it's whittled down over the years. And we're probably one of the top 3 growers as far as size of bedding plants in the nation. So, and proud of that heritage that we have.
Absolutely. You brought up an interesting point about, certain things don't grow well in certain places, but also the transportation, like you mentioned, the darkness, that can really impact it can really impact the health of the plant long term and even short term, obviously.
Yeah, that's one of the things we want Utah gardeners to know is we grow right here in the mountain valleys of Utah, in Santaquin and Salem. We have an operation in Lehi, a small one, but that makes a difference when a plant is grown in that climate where it's going to ultimately end up in somebody's yard. It just gets started better and it performs better over the long run. Even if it's an annual that's only going to last for 1 season, you'll have such better success with those healthy plants. And it's about transportation a little bit, but a lot of it in our climate, you can grow great flowers in California. The weather's just perfect, no matter where you're at in California. We're always envious of how great they can get things looking. But when they've shipped up to Utah from California or Oregon bedding plants, they just don't do well. And a lot of it is just the altitude difference. We're so much closer to the sun here that intense sunlight really hurts those flowers that were growing at sea level or 1,000 or 2,000 square feet above sea level. So that's the big thing is the height. We're providing the perfect climate in the greenhouse for flowers. So the temperature's not a big deal, but it's mainly about the light. And you want something acclimated. If you start seeds in your basement, or vegetable starts, you can't just put them out in the light. You'll burn them. And a lot of Utah gardeners know that. You've got to slowly move them out and give them a week or 2 to acclimate to the new environment. But you don't have that with Olson's greenhouse bedding plants because they're ready to go.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you mentioned that because I was going to ask you that because we do have quite a bit of questions that come into the Instagram page for Gardening Utah, which is at Gardening Utah. And the most recent one was about buying a tree from Costco that had started to turn brown really, really quickly. And the only reason that would probably happen, I figured, is that you just didn't harden it off very well. Right. As far as just taking it from inside Costco to outside. And I know that, especially with Olson's, I look for your tag as well, because I know this was grown here. I'm safe with this. And so my question for you is when it goes into the indoors at Costco,
right,
what's your suggestion for how do we need to harden those off and kind of give them a break when we get them straight out of the warehouse, keeping them in shade and kind of hardening? You really don't?
It's a great question, but you don't because they were grown in our greenhouses in full sunlight. Yeah. And so really the less time they can spend inside a Costco warehouse, the better, and Costco knows this, and we've all been working on this together, and we've had our challenges. We've decided which varieties work in a Costco environment, which ones don't. And some things work okay with low light for a couple days. But the bigger thing is we've just increased the frequency of our shipments. We're trying to, it's almost become, believe it or not, like toilet paper has been in Costco recently.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about how COVID-19 has affected our industry pretty soon. But if you think about it, we're trying to get plants in there and just let them sit there for just a few hours in that darkness.
Wow.
before a customer grabs them, and then we're coming back right back with another delivery. There's some Costco's where we literally deliver 3 times per day. And
That
because customers are just gobbling it up. The Boise Costco is the largest Costco in the entire United States in the month of May, and we're the supplier of their bedding plants. And we sell literally, we will sell over 1,000 geranium planters every single day in that Boise Costco for a few weeks.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay, so that's the tip, Gardening Utah listeners, is if you see the Olson's tag at the Costco, you know that you are safe to get that in the ground that day. I think that is such a great tip, and I'm really glad you mentioned that because, again, sometimes some of the real larger, items and things that have been there for a while, I think you have to be a little bit careful with. But
right.
I had no idea that you delivered that frequently, so that is
Costco's goal is to not water. They don't want to water it. They can, and they have, but rarely. They would prefer to bring it in heavily watered from us at the greenhouse and get it sold before it needs water again.
Oh, my word. Okay, that is fascinating. Well, as you mentioned, when we come back right after this break, we are going to talk about how the world has changed with COVID-19 and how it specifically has impacted your business, because obviously selling to these places when they're having to social distance and, a lot of us have had to stay home, it's impacted a lot. So we'll hear more from Brian about that right after this. Stay with us.
860 KKAT with Jenna Francis and Gardening Utah, where it's always mulch time. She really does have the nicest yard on the block. It's Gardening Utah with Jenna Francis on 860 KKAT.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jenna Francis, and with me in our virtual Zoom studio today is Brian Lloyd with Olson's Greenhouse. Brian, thanks again for being with us.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks, Jenna.
Yeah, so before the break, we were talking about how COVID-19 has obviously impacted the supply chain, if you will, of so many businesses. And, a lot of us need to stay home. And the reality is the places that you sell to, like Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, are considered essential businesses for obvious reasons. And yet it's really impacted, the distribution of your bedding plants, I believe. So I really am very curious on how COVID-19 has impacted your business specifically.
And yeah, and here we are in the first week of May, and we still don't know exactly how it's going to play out this season. But things are going good for right now. So we're totally optimistic. But this is like a tale of two cities. We started out not knowing. Everybody didn't know what was going to go on 6 weeks ago. And first of all, we started by how are we going to keep our workforce healthy? We were blessed to find out that we're in an essential industry with agriculture, but then we didn't know what certain states were going to do specifically with an ornamental grower like us. I mean, should we plant more vegetables so we can be really considered essential and, not only essential, but life sustaining, or
right.
And or is ornamental essential enough by itself? There's so many health benefits that we've recorded on our podcast recently. We recorded an episode on Dig in the Yard called What the World Needs Now. We got in with Dr. Charlie Hall and talked about the health benefits of gardening and of flowers. And there's several mental health benefits as well as physical benefits that gardening and flowers and all of that can provide. And those are all desperately needed right now. But we didn't know it. Our fate was really in the hands of local lawmakers and national lawmakers. And so this has been touch and go. And then our retailers, were they going to be allowed to stay open? There are some states like Michigan and Vermont where they shut down garden centers, and they shut down the garden center aspect of the big box stores like Walmart and Home Depot. You couldn't buy plants for a while there. They're back open now, fortunately, in those states. But for a while there, in several states, you couldn't buy bedding plants or vegetables. You couldn't even buy seed for your garden, even though, victory gardens are becoming a great thing with all this. So
definitely.
We've never known. And the biggest fear and scare that we've had is, well, two things. Number one, we get so busy. We have literally 1,500 across all of our locations, 1,500 seasonal employees this time of year. And how do we keep all those people healthy and coming to work? Because if they can't come to work, we won't be able to water our flowers. If one of them or 20 of them or 50 of them catch coronavirus, we're in trouble. And so immediately we tried to put things in place. Mask wearing before it was even mentioned by the CDC. We were doing it. We were spacing people out on lines. We were taking temperatures, making sure that if anybody had any symptoms, even if they had allergies, we were talking to them and deciding whether they needed to go home and just trying to protect our workforce. So that was one aspect of it. And we've had challenges through that, but we're doing okay there. So that's been great. And then the second challenge is, will we be able to, sell the amount of product that we need to sell? Once a crop gets ready, the shelf life is like 2 weeks. If we put a bunch of blooms on a flat of flowers, in 2 weeks, even though it's still alive, it's not really appealing and nobody wants to buy it. And so once it's ready, we can't slow it down too much. We can put some growth regulators on it and cool it down a little bit and buy us a few days. But, if we can't sell it in 2 weeks, it's going in the garbage. There's nothing we can do. And a lot of growers in the nation experience this with Easter crops. A lot of Easter lilies got thrown away this year. A lot of people still sold them, but, at that time when Easter was here a few weeks ago, we were concentrating on getting groceries, and toilet paper, not Easter lilies. And so even though people wanted them, their focus was on other places. And so we were scared to death. Are we going to be able to sell everything we've planted? And the margins aren't huge in this industry. Right. We don't make a lot of money on a good year. And so if we throw away 10% of our product, we're in trouble, big trouble.
Devastating.
And so we didn't know how that was going to go. Luckily, the demand has outweighed all these restrictions. So people are able to get to our flowers, and things are going okay right now.
Wow. It's interesting because we don't realize how many downwind impact that some of these things have downwind on so many businesses, like you mentioned with the Easter lilies. And I know a lot of people are hearing a ton right now about how this is impacting meat plants and, our animal supply. And I mean, it's just so scary how negatively it's impacted so many businesses. But I'm really glad to hear that, at least it feels like where we are right now, things are starting to level out and it's getting a little bit, more back to normal because, as you've even mentioned earlier, it's try to get into a Home Depot and Lowe's right now. It's tough. I mean, there's so many people packing those Home Depots right now.
And Home Depot's trying to limit their customer counts to it was 100, and now they've just loosened it to 150 in the store at a time. And Walmart, unfortunately, they had to react, and they closed all their entrances except one. This is a couple of weeks ago, and it was the grocery entrance is the one that was open as an entrance and an exit. And so our garden centers where our plants were not open as an entrance. And so if you wanted a plant from us, you had to walk down to the garden center, put it in your shopping cart, and go all the way back to the front entrance. And this is after you waited in line just to get in the store. And so it made it really hard. Even though people wanted our plants, it was tough. And our sales suffered for a while because of that. We just heard today, as we're recording this, Jana, that Walmart's going to start opening those garden centers this weekend. So in most of their stores, they're going to open that entrance up. And that's just smart because it's going to space customers out even better. And so I'm glad that they were able to pull that off. That'll help us.
That is such a relief. And you're right, it'll space it out more. And a lot of times, especially on weekends, I'll hit Walmart only to buy plants with no desire to go into the rest of the store. And so, what I wouldn't want to do is go and trek all of my plants all the way through the store.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, those checkouts aren't even made to deal with all the dirt from the plants.
And can you imagine if they're freshly watered? You're dripping a line of soil and water all the way down
all the way.
The cosmetics aisle.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. That's good to hear. Well, when we come back right after this break, we're going to continue on with more from Brian Lloyd with Olson's Greenhouse. Stay with us.
She's more than just gardening puns and sage advice. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis on 860 KKAT. 860 KKAT, with more of the fastest growing show on radio. It's Gardening Utah with Jana Francis.
Welcome back to Gardening Utah. I'm your host, Jana Francis, and with me in our virtual studio is Brian Lloyd from Olson's Greenhouse.
Hey, Jana. It's been such a great conversation so far. This has been awesome. Thanks for having us.
I know, this has been so much fun, and we were just having a really interesting discussion on the break because, you know, one of the things with Gardening Utah that I've really been priding myself on is, not priding myself on, but just that I've been excited about with the show is that I really like to support local businesses. And I think there's a little bit of a misnomer that we could talk about with regard to when you go to a local hardware store like Home Depot, which obviously you sell your plants to. Some people may think, well, I want to support local. So let's fix that misconception.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, and it just makes me sad because, you know, first of all, we're a local company, a local family business, and we supply so many jobs. We've been blessed and we've been able to grow and supply a lot of different garden centers and locations and grow a lot of bedding plants over the years. But what that's been able to do, one of our core values at Olson's Greenhouse, we have 5, and one of the first ones is our stewardship. We feel like we've been blessed with this business and this capacity to run a great company, but we have stewardship over our employees, and we provide so many jobs, and we're so happy to be able to do that, not only for local workers at our greenhouse locations, but we employ people out in the stores as well. Did you know that, Jana? We have a whole workforce that works on our flowers at every retail location at Home Depot and Walmart. So
I did not realize that.
We have a sister company that does merchandising for us. It's called ProGrow Partners. And we're hiring, by the way. If you love working out in the sun with flowers, there's no better job than this, and it's super flexible. You can work part-time or full-time, different hours of the day or night. We're always working. We put a lot of hours in this time of year, helping those Walmarts and Home Depots take care of their flowers, put them away, display them, and all that kind of stuff. So you're providing local jobs when you support Olson's Greenhouse and ProGrow. You're supplying or helping provide local jobs to people that live at your, near your local garden center as well. So we're definitely local in a lot of different ways. In fact, ProGrow has over 1,000 seasonal employees and 60 year-round employees that work just for ProGrow on that merchandising side of things.
That's unbelievable. And I think, why don't you, because I know that so many people right now obviously unemployment rates are going through the roof right now.
Right.
Maybe you could quickly give our listeners an idea of how they would find ProGrow if they were interested in maybe having a look at what working there would be like. Yeah,
that's one of the great things to come for us out of coronavirus and the whole pandemic is it's unfortunate that a lot of people have lost their jobs, but we're finding a lot of great people and we're able to put them to work right away. And so if you're interested in a job at your local Home Depot or Walmart working for us at ProGrow and Olson's Greenhouse, just go to progrowpartners.com, and our website lists all those jobs that are open right now. And that's we spell ProGrow without the W, so PROGRO partners.com. So it's really easy to find. You can do a Google search for it as well. And we also we've started wrapping our fleet vehicles. So all those year-round people, they drive a company vehicle around that has our logo on it. It says ProGrow Partners. You can't miss it. So if you ever see one of those vehicles out in the garden center and you're looking for a job, you know that one of our managers is working there. Just go hit them up and ask them what it's like. We wear vests that say ProGrow, that say merchandiser on the back. So you can see us working out in the stores as well.
I love this. I'm going to look at it so differently now when I'm at Home Depot looking around or Walmart and saying, okay, well, there they are.
Yeah, we know that, at the grocery store, there's a bread company that puts the bread away and the Coke company puts the soda away. But we do the same thing with flowers. And it's helped us and it's helped Walmart become such a better retailer of flowers and bedding plants because they didn't, they had a lot of seasonal help and didn't have the capacity to train that help. Well, we do. We have that capacity. We put these people through trainings. So they're not gardening experts necessarily, but they love working in the outdoors. They love working with people. and they're able to help you get your questions answered a little bit better than the traditional Walmart associate or Home Depot associate that was in lumber yesterday and got put out in the garden center because they needed extra help today. We're all about gardening at ProGrow, so we're happy to help.
I had no idea. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think now as the Gardening Utah listener is out walking around in those stores, they're going to think of it completely differently, you know? Yeah. And listen, if you're into gardening and you are, needing a position right now, it sounds like these are seasonal. I think you said it was ProGrow with no W.
Yep.
.com.
ProGrowPartners.com, PROGRO partners.com, or you could call our toll-free number. It's 844-4PROGROW. So 844-4PROGRO.
Fantastic.
Easy.
I love that. I feel like that's such a good resource for people that may need it right now, because obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you're into gardening in some way, shape, and form.
Yeah, traditionally, a lot of our employees have been, people that are just looking for maybe a secondary job, get a little supplemental income. But now it's like life essential for some people, and we're happy to be able to provide those types of jobs for certain people.
That's very, very cool. Speaking of jobs, you mentioned to me that, when you first were married, you ended up making a little bit of a transition and ended up at Utah State in horticulture. And I don't think we got into that yet. I think that just fascinated me.
Yeah. So I met my wife when I was at BYU as a freshman, and I was working odd jobs, installing car stereos, whatever it took. And she said, if you're going to marry me, you're not going to do that. So you're going to support me. And we walked through the greenhouse, and her dad was kind enough to offer me something long-term in the company, in the family business. And so my wife was the oldest of the Olson kids at that point. And so it was kind of his first foray into what was this new world of the next generation going to look like. And so when I decided that I would go into the family business, Olson's Greenhouse, I decided I better get a horticulture degree. So BYU didn't have a program at the time, and so I moved to Utah State. And so my wife and I packed up, and up in Logan, we had our first kid and our first condo and our first pets and our but that kind of went interesting. All the horticulture classes have to be done in the spring because that's when you learn how to propagate and how to build a greenhouse and grow plants and all that kind of stuff. And that's when the family business needed me to sell. I was selling and making phone calls. And so we had to make a choice, and we actually put the family business off so I could finish my degree. I actually got partway through my degree and actually switched to business. And so I ended up getting a marketing degree in business with a horticulture minor, and we felt like that's what would help the family business the most. And I came back after school was done and have been working full-time ever since. Wow.
I love that story.
And now all of Bart's 5 children or their spouses are working in the family business. We actually now have all 5 boys that were either his sons or in-laws, and 4 of the women of the girls that are working in the family business. And the 5th one will probably be there someday soon.
Yeah.
As soon as her kids are a little more grown. So
that's amazing. I mean, what a tribute to him, right?
Right.
Yeah. This business could not only just, started in, what did you say, 1942.
Exactly.
And just out of the backyard and expand over half of us, well, more than that. I mean, that's just unbelievable. What a neat story. And, we were also talking about this time of year, typically you're very busy with Container Fest. And I know that a lot of our listeners have probably been to Home Depot. I know I would save all my containers, and it was like, all right, Container Fest, let's go. And obviously that's changed. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, we missed it so badly this year. We couldn't do it because it would bring people too close together, and so we had to substitute. And it was really sad because I developed Container Fest from the beginning. I think this was the 12th year. I think it might have even been longer than that. I can't remember how many we've done, but we started in the mid 2000s, and the concept was you can bring your container from home from last year, or we have plenty of selection at Home Depot. You can buy one there, but we're going to bring in a whole bunch of great plants, the newest stuff, that are thrillers or fillers or spillers, things and components that make great containers. And we're going to give you advice and help you plant them up and get our hands dirty for you and help you pick out your combination. And we teamed up with Proven Winners, and they would provide different recipe cards for us, and we would grow all the components that made up those recipes. And then we teamed with Scott's Miracle Grow, and they would provide all the soil for free for that day. And so as long as you brought your container from home or as long as you bought your plants there at the store, we would plant it up and you'd get free potting mix. And it was a great event. And we would have lines all day long, even if it was snowing. People would still, wait in line, and we would always do it in April, even though the weather could be iffy, because containers are such a great thing for early spring, because if you can plant some tender stuff, and then if we're going to get cold, you just move it in the garage for that night, or they're easier to cover that way. And so it gave people a jump on spring, and we couldn't do it because of COVID-19 this year. So we just launched a new idea, and what we're going to do is now we're going to run a contest, and we'll do a giveaway at the end. So we've teamed up with Progressive Plants, Cameron Alcott, who you had on last week. He's going to be giving away something for his flowers or his trees and shrubs. We're going to find a way to give away Olson's greenhouse bedding plants as well. And for the month of May, we're going to ask subscribers to the Utah Gardeners Facebook group to come in and show us their containers. They're going to plant things up, and we're going to pick winners. So
if you're not a member of Utah Gardeners, it's the opposite of this podcast name. So go to Facebook and type in Utah Gardeners, and you'll find the group there. And it's easy to search for your post. In fact, it might even be pinned on the top for the contest. I think.
We'll pin it on the top, and we're going to actually launch it May 1st. So it just launched.
Fantastic. I think that's a great, a way to get everybody motivated to fill those containers and do a fun job to hopefully win some good stuff from you and Cameron, or specifically from Olson's Greenhouse and from Progressive Plants. So, Brian, you have been so much fun to have on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I can't wait to have you back. Tell me how people can find you and Olson's Greenhouse.
Yeah, our biggest thing is we want to educate customers. It's hard to find because we can't put our logo on every one of our plants. It just doesn't work that way. And so we grow Proven Winners and other brands. But to find Olson's Greenhouse, it's best to just go to ogg.com, and we'll send you places from there. We'll tell you where to buy our plants, find your local Home Depot, Walmart, or Costco. And we also have a podcast called Dig in the Yard. So look us up on your favorite podcast player.
And I love that. I love that podcast as well. So subscribe to their show as well. Well, Brian, can't wait to have you back. Thanks so much for joining us here on Gardening
Utah.
Thanks,
Jana.
Thank you so much to Brian Lloyd of Olson's Greenhouse. What a delight to speak with. So much knowledge and information. And I'm really glad that we were able to talk to him today. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode and were inspired or learned something new. Please subscribe to this show on Apple Podcasts. It's really easy. Just if you have an iPhone, open up the podcast app and look for Gardening Utah and hit subscribe, and you'll never miss an episode. Or you can find us wherever you listen to your podcasts. And then look us up on Instagram. We are at Gardening Utah. Send us a message and tell us what you'd like to see or hear on the show. And if you know of someone who would like to be considered as a guest or a sponsor, send me a message on that too. And help us get the word out about this show. Tell a friend, tell a fellow garden guru. I'd love to have them join our Gardening Utah group of listeners. This show is a Cumulus Media production, and shout out to our producer, Lambo. We'll see you next week on Gardening Utah. And remember, grow big or go home.
When you're ready to grow big or go home, make your neighbors green with envy. Get the Gardening in Utah podcast, Gardening Utah, available wherever you get your podcasts and at 860kkat.com/garden.